Hey everybody, I need to start this bad boy up. npm start. Um, so basically, when I left off, I'd come to the conclusion that, um, and it's so wild, because you can't. The architecture, the way this is set up, there's no single place or single thing where you can understand this validation scheme from top to bottom. You kind of have to go step by step across these different layers of abstraction, and it is confusing. But the so the disadvantage is like there's no one place you can go and just sort of understand everything. The advantage is you don't have to understand everything. Like you can sort of understand one small piece. And one of the pieces of this was that we get a validator, a set of tokens that are our validators. And just because of happenstance, just because um, we I set it up to where the validator tokens that we set up are all like sort of documented would probably be the best way in this validation service. So when you look at this validation service, and they are stored in a tree. So like this, based on the path. Um, so I say, hey, inside of the scene and fog density, this is invalid positive float is the token. And a token is just a word. It's just a word that you can then use in other places to get other things. So in this case, against this dictionary, you can get the message, the validation value text. So you're getting the text for your token off of this guy, and you're getting your function for the token, right? So for invalid posit for this, you're getting invalid. You can get that, and there's functions that will return that. So you say, hey, get the validation text for the token. You give it the token, it looks in here and it gives you that. Um, and then just as just sort of through instinct, I ended up setting up um, there's a whole concept around validators, and that validators that's all tied into reactive forms. So like reactive forms has a sort of a thing where you can get that's very very specific to them, where you get something called a validator, and a validator is this. It's like you give it a control, and it returns either validation errors if it finds an error, or null if it doesn't find one. And this is defined by the Angular team. And I don't know, like I would imagine the reactive form, there's a specific team for reactive forms. I would guess. I don't know. But so you get one of these functions that returns that accepts a control, and it returns validation errors. And we look in that control, and if that control is not a legal positive floating point validator, then um, then it will return a null. But if it's legal. But if it's not, it'll return an error, and the name of that error is going to be an invalid positive float error. And like if you want to try to understand all of that, you're going to have to spend a bunch of time like looking at all the different layers and seeing how it all puts together. But at any individual layer, if you're just willing to take it for granted that the layers before and the like, if you're just willing to take it for granted that you're going to get a validation function um, from here, and maybe I should have named it validation function. That you're just going to get a validation function. What did I do wrong? Oh, I misspell function by living off the C all the time. So if you just take it for granted that you're going to get a validation function that knows how to determine what a positive floating value is, then you can just take that for granted and you can say, oh, okay, I'm going to get my value. If it's null or empty, then I'm going to return that it's an invalid positive float and it's true. And then I'm going to run this function, and if it returns a true, I'm going to return a null, which is confusing. That is confusing, right? True is a null and false is an invalid positive float true. So we've got all our language. It's all like, give me something positive, I'll give you something negative. Give me something negative, I'll give you something positive. Yeah, it's weird. It is weird. But if this was all in one big kind of bunch of code, it would be hard it'd be almost impossible to sort of put it all together. So like you can kind of understand this by just sort of looking at it. So in that vein, with that in mind, you just kind of have taken into faith that there's this thing called these validation tokens, and that we loop over each one of these validation tokens to get validators. And so like, if you give it a path of scene and density, you're going to get an array of validation tokens. And I call them validation token type. And it's an array of validation things that are validation token types. And right now, the only two kinds you can have are an invalid positive float and a none. So now, though it just happens to be that this invalid positive float is exactly what I coded. This has error invalid positive float. Kind of a coincidence, kind of not. So what I can do is I could, instead of like just hard coding this here, I could just create a list of my tokens. So I'm just going to say validation tokens, which is an array of validation token types. And I'm going to initialize it to an empty array. Then, and boy, do I hope this works. I'm not 100%. I promise I have not like tried this ahead of time, like that. So now, I don't know why I wanted to name it validations tokens. I think I already pluralized the validation. Okay. Oh, and I don't need to re-declare what kind of thing is. So now I'm using these validation tokens. I'm using it so that I can feed it to Angular forms and say, hey, here are all the things that I want you to validate this form against. And I don't know how any of that works. I just have to take it for granted that if I give it a list of validators and they're formatted and put together in the way that this thing is expecting, that it's going to magically set this has error thing over in the thing as true. And I have been very careful to kind of set up this architecture so that this word here has error makes sense, that it matches up, that they line up. And it's kind of a coincidence, but I kind of had a feeling. And the only reason I had a feeling is because I've worked with a ton of these things before, and I thought that the architects that set these bizarre things up were I was about to go going to go too far there. We're just nuts, they were off their rockers. But now they're kind of crazy. But basically I do want to set up a loop that does this, but I don't want that loop to create any DOM elements, because what I have also learned is that I believe, and this is a guess, but I believe this mat error has to be a sibling on the DOM to this input, or it breaks. So I kind of wish they had added like a for like me or whatever, like, or self. I don't know. I can't remember how they do this. Self, me, and for me. Like a way that I could, so that they wouldn't, so that it wouldn't like have to be like just assume that it's going to be. But basically, there's a CSS breakage that happens if this isn't in the same dude. So I believe what you want to do is you want to do let's see, let's try the, do I have it? I know I have an app for somewhere. Maybe you don't need to do that anymore. You used to have to do like an ng, a special ng container or something like that um, to not have a DOM element. Maybe with this new, oh yeah, it looks like with this, oh, so that's one of the huge benefits to this new template language that came, I believe it was in Angular 17. Because it used to be you kind of had to tie it to a tag, and they did have a special tag, but let's see, token. What did I name that? What is your name? Validation tokens. And okay, so I'm thinking that I can do this, and then yeah. So fog density is the same name. It's all for this guy, for this control name. But this, if there's more than one token, so I'm saying, hey, if I get the validation token, then and pass it the validation token. So basically, I need to put this in these brackets, and it's like these brackets mean to calculate it. Whereas if there's no brackets, that means that you're giving it directly to it. So in this case, I'm saying use this string, but in this case, I'm saying use this variable. But it's like there is no variable named that. It's kind of a funny thing because it's really token. It's really it's super easy to learn, like once you figure it out, but you can actually code in Angular for years. I think I may have coded in Angular for like 3 or 4 years before I realized the difference between when there's a bracket and when there's not a bracket. And what really threw me off is that, like, let's say it is a string, you could do that. I would see this all the time. So like, and it's like, why? Why would that work? And it's because it's calculating. It does a calculation of that text, but I don't actually want it to do a calculation of that text because I gave it a string. So I'm telling it, go ahead and treat this, and that it just took me forever to ever just slow down and just read what the brackets meant. And once I read what the brackets meant, it made like a lot of days a lot better. Because I just would just kind of randomly try stuff until it worked. Now I don't know if this is gonna work. Gosh, I hope it works. I don't know why. I'm just not in the mood to play around today with that. So let's see. Let's just cross our fingers. And wrong one. And then A. So that for loop, for some reason, added some kind of DOM element in between there, which I think I mean that's my theory is that mat error and input. So I don't understand, but I don't know. You may not realize what we're looking at. For some reason now, this is not showing properly, just because I put it in this for loop. So before, so I'll just show you, and it's kind of a bummer because I was really hoping to be able to just have like something I could just blindly copy and paste. I mean, this still works, but you notice that that little line is down there, and then let's see. Yeah, see now it's up there. So I don't know why adding that for loop. That is just a true mystery to me. Why putting this? Why adding it into the for loop? Let me. Like I don't know. I don't. I just cannot for the life of me understand why adding this there, adding this for loop around there would cause that markup to break. Because I mean, like, let me see, inspect, see if we can see anything in here. App validation error message, div class MDC. So let's yeah, for some reason adding that for loop. Let's see. Causes that markup to break. So I'm going to try this again. See, like it breaks all the markup, and I don't really get why that would break up all the markup. It doesn't seem like it should. See, and actually now it is a sibling, so that like my theory before was like it's a sibling, but for some reason it just didn't know how to wrap it around the other markup. It just screwed it all up, and I don't know. It could be a bug in on the Angular material side. Um, if it is, I suspect it will resolve itself, and that at some point in the future, this code right here would just magically like not break. I don't think it's worth my time to try to figure it out at this point. I guess when I get to the point where I can have multiples, I'll just have two ifs wherever these are instead of trying to for loop over them. But this is like where it takes a lot of discipline, because if we're not going to be doing that, then we really do need to get rid of this line of code, this stuff, because like it's so hard, to for a future developer, which is probably going to be me, to know um, um, to know why in the world I did certain things, or why that was. I don't know what is this problem now. This is really distracting me. I'm not using it as a value there. I feel like this have to be a. See, it's saying that I'm. Oh, it's because I didn't. That's funny. because I didn't give it a, what is that word called? Um, I didn't declare what kind of variable it was. There's a very special word that sounds so smart that you can use when you use that. So let's just make sure we're still working. I thought that was a good idea to do that, and that was really the whole point of this whole darn video, was to do that. I am glad I caught that. I mean that I tried it and that I saw that it doesn't uh, let you do a for loop. I feel like that's the kind of thing that a lot of developers will do. Like they'll write a whole bunch of code and that'll just be one of many things, and then they'll be like, they'll just kind of check to see if everything seems to work, and then they check it in, and then they get emotionally attached to that code, and they want to make that for loop work because there's really no good reason, like um, with all common sense and just normal like human thought, logical, I don't know, however we've been trained, whatever has trained us to think in certain ways and all that, there's no good reason why that having that app for loop thing should break anything. It should not care, but it does. And I don't know why. And you can, it would probably be insanely useful. Like if I did, like if these were very, very angular, like exclusive videos where all we did was dig into the deep recesses of why things work the way they do, like that would probably be a very, very good video to dig into that and really understand why that, what I would think is a bug in Angular material. Like Angular material, for some reason, thinks that for some reason that for loop is throwing off Angular material and making it not realize that it's part of um, that this, this line and this whole thing is supposed to be above it. I don't know why. But um, I could probably spend a month trying to figure that out. And it's probably not a good idea to spend that time on that because, like I said, it's probably something that they'll just fix, and it won't be a big deal in the future. And then adding, you know, what's the big deal? So I'll have another if there's two of them. I'll just now. What would have been nice about that is that if I added yet another kind of validation, it would just automatically work everywhere for me. Now it's not going to work everywhere for me, which is a bummer, but not that big of a deal. Anyways, happy coding, everybody. Bye.